And I will call on the next speaker, Stephen Kurtz. In brief, he is a director of our Council on Global Issues. He's a member of the Canadian Association for the Club of Rome. He has a philosophy degree from New York University, a 25-year career in financial derivatives on Wall Street, specializing in currency options. 9 years organic gardening in rural New Hampshire. And he's director of a community land trust. He's active in environmental and population and sustainability organizations. He's moderator of an economics list on the internet and lives now in Ottawa, Canada, and does research on sustainable future. Steve.
That was an ecological economics list, not a regular economics list. I have no slides or overheads for a change. I want to start with reading 2 things that Plato wrote. In the Republic, Glaucon observes that, this is the quote, "Sex is perhaps more effective than mathematics when it comes to persuading or driving the common man to do anything," unquote. Another quote from Laws, Plato, is, "A suitable total for the number of citizens cannot be fixed without considering the land." So he sort of had it covered at both ends, at the personal end and at the whole system end. The previous speakers and Anatole Rappaport in the keynote speech have adequately covered the mess we're in. I have a couple of pages in my paper with quotes from some of these scientists' reports about how significant a problem overpopulation is. In most of the fixes that have been put forward, the best we've heard is slowing population growth. Well, that may be insufficient. Earth is a nearly closed system. We have energy inputs, but not much else. We have a shrinking pie of natural wealth, and we have 250,000 more people every day trying to share it. So redistribution in itself, for social justice advocates, is an insufficient answer. The definition of wealth that's been used in some of these discussions this week has been the traditional one, neoclassical, tokens, credits. Well, you can't eat them, and they won't keep you warm. You can have a check for $1 trillion and still starve or die of thirst. So it's the natural wealth that obviously we must maintain and we must share. And Al Bartlett, at the Emeritus Professor of Physics at the University of Colorado, put out a funny piece called the Flat Earth Society, because he says the way we're proceeding is as if the Earth is infinite in size and flat, with no boundaries. Sex as a taboo topic has been mentioned by Helmut, and that's great. Let me try to get into some of the parts of my paper. I'm going to have to skip around, but let's assume that we have some free will. As a philosophy student, I'm unwilling to assert that we do, that determinism is still quite tenable. Material well-being increases. People tend to have smaller families. Now, in certain historical cases, that has occurred. Several times there have been generational delays, so you might have 2 or 3 generations between when the economy starts doing better and then the birth rates drop. In the opportunity model, and there are references in Virginia Abernethy's Population Politics, that she mentions 2 in particular. One is in Ireland, when the famine was very bad, fertility rates were sharply cut, and then when the potato was introduced, family size immediately shot up because material well-being was enhanced and the opportunity to feed a family was perceived, future perceived as better. So it's not an open question that the immediate fix is to somehow share whatever resources we have with people that are suffering as a way to reduce fertility. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done. I'm just saying that it's not insufficient in itself. Education and technology for family planning would seem to me to need to be accompanied, or you're risking providing the opportunity for people who might have small families to do the first natural thing, which could be to have more children. Go to the next page. There was a biologist named D.H. Stott who in '62 did some interesting studies about natural fertility inhibitors in certain species in advance of when food was perceived as extremely short or difficult to obtain. And I'm going to read a short quote here. The predicted catastrophe of a world population increasing by geometrical progression to the point of starvation is unlikely to occur. It will be forestalled, if not by conscious human design, by physiological mechanisms, which have evolved to obviate such a calamity. This is not to minimize the fact that these mechanisms themselves are highly unpleasant. Nature prescribes happiness when it has survival value. To man, nevertheless, is given an answer. We need not wait for the physiological killers and maimers to come upon us. It should not, however, be beyond the capacity of man to develop cultural methods of regulating population numbers which do not involve distress and unhappiness, unquote. Bill Reese was already mentioned, and he has referred to the relevance, 10 years ago, relevance of work by Prigogine and Stengers and Crutchfield and Palmer regarding thresholds of unpredictability. The systemic feedback that will affect human numbers with or without our intent may be unexpected in timing and intensity. Worth noting here is the principle of the weak link as expressed by Reese, and this is a quote. It should be understood that while human society depends on many ecological resources and functions for survival, carrying capacity is ultimately determined by the single vital resource or function in least supply. That's from 1990. Now I want to discuss briefly equilibrium as a concept. I don't know that, I don't expect that we would have a very stable population at any point unless it was extinction at zero. It would be temporally variable with environmental conditions. And the concept of carrying capacity to me is not the way to go, because to me it's a maximum threshold concept, which means you're bumping up against the limits, critical limits, on a constant basis, and whichever is the weakest link at the time is your restraint, but it involves suffering and unintended, put it this way, the highest risk of unintended reductions without our own volition. There have been other people that have put forward the concept of optimum population, including Gretchen Daly and the Ehrlichs, and somebody's even mentioned minimum viable population, which I think it's been quite a while, maybe in prehistory, since that was significant. A quote from the Daly paper and the Ehrlichs is, in general, we should choose a population size that maximizes very broad environmental and social options for individuals. A colleague of mine, Bruce Buchanan, who's also with us on the Council on Global Issues, has emphasized human freedom as a primary value. You already rushing me? Oh, boy. Okay. Nicholas Blumbergen is a Nobel winner in physics. He has stated that 1 billion, and I'm going to read the quote, 1 billion might be the number that would be long-term sustainable. Boy, oh boy. Would a total world population of about 1 billion, as existed 200 years ago, represent a reasonable compromise between quantity and quality of human life? The answer clearly involves value judgments. That was 1996, addressing colleagues at Harvard. J. Kenneth Smale has said 2 billion. Reese and Wackernagel have suggested 2 billion. I'm going to have to get to, have to skip over something, but there's been a lot of, shall we say, reactions which accuse the well-to-do nations with trying to coerce the less fortunate nations to reduce their birth rates. There are 37 countries that signed the document in 1989 at the UN, and it's in my paper, urging world population stabilization. The two Western nations that signed it were Austria and Iceland. Period. At the Cairo conference, there was commitments of certain amounts of financial aid for family planning, and about 1/4 has been delivered. So the answer is that the West is not fulfilling its commitments and is not responding to the demands of the poor countries. It's not that we're trying to tell the poor countries to reduce their fertility. We're not helping them do so when they want to do so. Julius Nyeri, who's the president of the South Commission, said, where's my quote? Well, what he said was that, I'll paraphrase it, that in the long term development is necessary, but overpopulation must be controlled first. Lastly, there's been some very good results by some foundations that have been committing money to family planning. Rockefeller Institute and Rockefeller Foundation has been very active for years. Ted Turner's $1 billion to the UN is earmarked for women's empowerment and family planning. The Gates Foundation is now involved. And just last week, the Packard Foundation, which I didn't know was the second largest philanthropy in the United States, has formed a coalition between CARE, Save the Children, Planned Parenthood, Audubon Society, and Population Action International to show the linkages between health, family planning, ecology, and population. So everybody in the scientific community agrees that well, not everybody, the vast majority, the consensus, that we've vastly overshot. The direction is downward, and it's probably the best bang for the buck as far as committing our efforts, because if we reduce the multiplier and start to shrink, we might buy ourselves time. Thank you very much.